Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Don't worry, you are not getting shortchanged this week. I'm merely adding a few finishing touches to my Gary Vaynerchuk interview at the WCIT event in Armenia. And there'll also be a video version of this one so you can see me and the big man talking in Armenia. But today I want to talk about the incredibly serious difference technology is making on the medical industry. For example, in almost every aspect of our lives, we're talking about the benefits of personalisation. But in a world of hundreds of different cancers and patients with a unique set of genes, DNA, lifestyles and environments where they live, personalisation is crucial to patients. And we're beginning to see a move away from that one-size-fits-all approach. And technology is changing how the industry thinks about clinical testing by analysing historical data with artificial intelligence and machine learning to get the right people with the right trials and the right drugs. So today I invite you to join me and the guys at Lantern Pharma, a pharmaceutical company that uses AI and machine learning to rescue failed cancer drugs. But enough from me. Let's get them on the show now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, thanks. My name is Pana Sharma. I'm the new CEO at Lantern Pharma. I joined the company about a year ago, and Lantern is a very unique oncology biotech clinical stage because we're really leveraging artificial intelligence data and machine learning to help solve some of the biggest issues in oncology, which largely pertain to understanding how the drugs will work best in what patients. And there's so many great drugs that have been developed, or compounds actually, over the last 10, 20 years, but they failed to get to market not because they're not safe, not because they're not effective, but they're not effective enough in wide enough a population, and the clinical trials weren't designed properly. And so now we live in an era of where personalized medicine is accepted by most of the regulatory bodies, and we have increasing amounts of genomic and transcriptomic data available. And so we're now leveraging all that data and computing power to really understand how we should target the drug to the right patient population and how to design the trial based on that. And so our company is really unique in the sense that we have just as many data scientists and AI people and IT folks as we do biologists and cancer genomic folks. So it's really right down the middle. We believe this is a new way of doing drug development and drug discovery, is really leveraging the power of big data and machine learning.
And there are just a few of the reasons why I'm so excited to get you on the podcast today. But for people that are tuning in and hearing about you guys for the first time, can you just tell me a little bit more about how Lantern Pharma is aiming to change how the industry thinks about clinical testing, ultimately by analysing historical data with AI and machine learning to get the right people to the right trials with the right drugs?
Yeah, it's to get those right people, but also to really understand how the drug itself works. And so that is one of the most exciting parts is, not only are we able to better understand the patient, but we're also able to better understand the biology as well. And that's very important. So it gives us better biological insight because most drugs now aren't just done alone, they're done in combination. And so as you'll find that, drugs aren't necessarily given, one at a time. They're often given in combination. And so understanding what those combinations are and understanding, more importantly, how to design the trial to make it happen more rapidly is really important, because you can also then change the cost curve. And one of the, the background things that I'm actually very excited about, and I know the pharma industry doesn't always agree with this, is that we're living in an era where we've got such tremendous cost in oncology care, very high drug cost. And cancer doesn't always go away. I mean, we do hear about these wonder drugs every now and then, but that's in a very small percentage of the population. For the vast majority of the population, cancer becomes a recurring, a chronic issue. And so the costs are very high for cancer care. And, a lot of studies have shown that, for those who do come down with cancer or get cancer, it is a life-changing event, not only from a social and personal level, but it's also economically life-changing. And so being able to rescue and revitalize these drugs and change the cost curve is really important. So if you look at industries such as like Uber or Amazon or any other industry that has been able to leverage technology significantly to change the value chain or supply chain or the process, the costs have just plummeted down. And that has not happened in healthcare. And it especially has not happened in the pharma industry. So part of my hope and part of why I joined Lantern is in the back of my mind, I'm really thinking, let's get the right drugs to the right patients to understand it better, but also can we really change the cost curve? Cancer, now we're living in an era where you've got drugs now that are going to market that are costing on average from cancer almost close to $200,000 and per, on an annualized basis. And, we have also a drug now that's $2 million in gene therapy for blindness. So we're living in an era where the cost is becoming more and more unapproachable. So, innovation is fantastic, but innovation needs to be achieved in a way that it can be accessible. And so I'm hoping that in the era where machine learning and data-driven approaches to design drugs and develop drugs and design trials will also change the cost curve, so we can take some of the zeros off of cancer care and make it much more approachable, affordable, and scalable. And so that's also, I think, one of the biggest promises in leveraging artificial intelligence to help with the development of cancer therapies.
And just to help listeners fully understand the scale of the problem that we're tackling here, why is it that most cancer drugs are failing these clinical trials?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little about the later stage trials. So most cancer drugs, if they get to a phase 2B or a phase 3 trial, these are drugs or compounds that are typically pretty safe. Otherwise they wouldn't have gotten that far. They're tolerable, meaning that the side effects in humans are fairly well understood and well tolerated and make clinical sense. And the reason they typically fail phase 3, and same with the 2 phase 3 drugs that we licensed and that failed, is that they didn't work in enough patients well enough. And the reason here is twofold. Number one, the trial itself wasn't designed for that particular patient population because scientifically, and again, this all goes back to data, they didn't know exactly what patients in that type of cancer would respond best. And second, we really didn't have the regulatory pathways to do these kind of precision and focused trials. So one of our drugs, it failed a large-scale, multi-hundred patient, phase 3 global clinical trial for non-small cell lung cancer. But when we peel back the data and say, okay, well, it worked in some patients really well, but in large part, it didn't beat the standard of care, which was paclitaxel or docetaxel, which are chemotherapy agents. So imagine that. So still chemotherapy, 30, 40-year-old approach is still working better than these new targeted drugs. But there was a lot of discussion about certain patients that responded really well. And so as you peel back the data retrospectively, you see, wow, this drug really worked well in non-small cell lung cancer patients that never smoked. And it worked really well in non-small cell lung cancer patients that were female. And it worked extraordinarily well in female never smokers. And in fact, it extended their overall survival by 125% over standard of care. And you would think, wow, that's great, 125%. That drug should be approved, right?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that was not the question they were asking in the trial. The trial was not designed for never smoker female pot. In fact, they had some ideas about women responding better to this drug, but again, the trial wasn't powered for that. So it failed to meet the clinical endpoints, which was overall survival for non-small cell lung cancer. So drug was shelved. And so now we know years later, well, never smoking lung cancer or non-smoking is a totally different disease. It's very genomically very different. And especially for women. And it's a very quiet disease, has different mutations. It has mechanistically different issues happen at the gene expression level. And so that's why that drug works, because that drug is made somehow that's the patient population. So now we understand the patient group that will work best in. We've designed also a gene expression signature that we think whoever harbors this gene expression will respond really well to this drug. And we're in the final phases of kind of reviving this and going back to the regulatory authorities and saying, okay, well, Lantern now owns the drug and we are going to revive the trial and we're going to change the trial to this. And here's our biological cause why, and here's the mechanisms in terms of the genetic level of what's going on. And here's the population that we're going to test for, which is never smoking women. And here's also why there's a huge clinical need, because there's more and more women that are never smokers are coming down with lung cancer. And so all this will go back to the regulatory bodies, the EMA, the FDA, and will hopefully fast track a trial. And, biology, specifically cancer biology and drug development, has really been, a couple of experts kind of ad hoc being able to discover and discuss and talk about these things. And that's no way to run in the development of cancer drugs. And so now that we have machine-driven approaches, we can throw away the ad hoc approach and really do a very data-driven 24 hours a day, 7 days a week approach, and then feed the information to the cancer biologists and experts and KOLs. And it's a totally different cycle. And and this is really what I call the AI is really augmented. It's not just artificial. It doesn't give us the full answer, but it's augmented. We're augmenting our abilities to analyze and view data, ask questions 24 hours a day. And that is really the way we're going to change the efficiency, effectiveness, and the cost associated with cancer drug development.
So why is precision medicine such a big changer for treating cancer? Well, especially cancer. Is there anything that you've noticed there, or anything you've uncovered that proves this?
Fundamentally, the cancer therapy industry, we know now that cancer is not one disease. It's dozens and dozens of different diseases and approaches. And, leukemias and lymphomas, they're literally almost 100 different types. And they're genetically different. And so we don't have 100 different drugs. But now with the power of precision approaches and molecular characterization of the disease and better genetic understanding of how these drugs work, we can design drugs, trials, combinations to really personalize or more importantly, stratify and classify these diseases better, and then put the right drug combinations in place. So it's it's really personalizing treatment, and for something like cancer, it's very critical because the outcome in cancer, as we all know, is very bad. This is not a common cold or a cardiac event. That we're talking about cases where literally in months or less than a year, 2 years, it could absolutely change someone's life and the life of the families around them. So getting to this level of personalization has been key. We all know in the cancer community, we know that cancer is a genetic disease, but now we have the tools to understand the genetics of the individual, model the right kind of drug therapy, and more importantly, design the drugs from the start to really target all these various cancer subtypes.
And it's easy, of course, to get carried away with technology and talk of the future. But can you tell me a little bit more about why historical data is equally as critical, if not more so, in the quest for new cancer drugs?
Yeah, so historical data is very important. So there are different types of historical data. One is the data from trials themselves that have happened. That's really critical. How did patients respond? Which ones didn't respond? Do we have some underlying healthcare data or genetic data or biomarker data that can help us uncover the role that responders had and versus non-responders? That's very important. But then we also look at historical data from the labs, laboratory work, and what was uncovered, if anything, about how that drug worked in cell lines and PDX models and other experiments. How did this drug, bind or dock? What is the mechanism of action that was uncovered or explored and not fully understood? So that historical data, we comb through that, hundreds of pages, hundreds and hundreds or thousands of pages, both clinical and as well as preclinical, as well as laboratory experiments. And that gives us a better understanding of what is the problem that we can solve here to potentially rescue this drug. But now the challenge is historical data, and we oftentimes look at all that, but then we don't incorporate it into our platform because historical data was done with different machines. It was done with different values. It was done in a way that may have been inconsistent. And so we're not able to feed that data to the machine. And that's unfortunate, because it's in the machine, every piece of data is data. And so we might get some insight from it, but then we should decide, okay, well, we can't really feed this data set because it was done incompletely, or it was done with a lot of noise, or it was done with different values, so that it'll throw off our gene expression patterns. And so historical data is very important in terms of the context of analyzing the problem that we're going to solve and putting some boundary conditions around it or giving some potential insights. But like all data issues and data problems, it has to be looked at with a very careful eye because, when you introduce data into our platform or into any platform, it can change it and it can change the outputs, and you have to be thoughtful about how you curate that data. That's a challenge for our industry. It's a challenge for us all the time too, in terms of data curation and discussion about the data sets that we are incorporating into our platform for discovery or for rescue.
And presumably then, that's where AI comes in to process the information that was possibly until now hidden away or locked away in data silos. Is that right?
Yeah, we definitely are able to do that. I mean, the biggest role that AI plays is just being able to churn through the data. And it's not a matter of the data is locked away, it's just a matter of data has never been really analyzed and processed using these modern approaches. And so I think one of the best things about AI is that, the ability to, transform what is months or weeks of work using traditional statistical approaches and change that to hours or minutes. And so that is really very important. And if you can change that to hours or minutes, the biologists and the genomic folks and doctors and clinicians, we can ask important questions every day or almost real time, as opposed to asking a question and waiting for 3-4 months. And so oftentimes it's not a matter that the data is in silos. It's a matter that the data really hasn't been processed and analyzed because it was too cumbersome, too difficult, required too much computing power, etc.
So can you walk me through this new approach that you're taking and the role of technology and all that you're going to use to bring this new way forward?
Yeah, so I can, this is, we're part, Lantern is part of a, I would say a pretty large scale phenomena now that's beginning to happen with a, data-centric or machine-centric approach to either drug discovery and drug development or drug rescue. And so we're using, our platform RADR is really focused on uncovering why certain drug compounds that were cancer focused work in certain patients and not others, and teasing out that genetic signature. And like most companies that succeed in these data-driven approaches, you have to solve for one thing really well. And so what we started solving for is identifying rapidly, cost-effectively, that genetic signature that will give us information on how that drug works and why that drug works in that particular patient or that particular cancer subtype, and having a robust genetic signature to identify the patients that are most likely to respond to our drug or, the drug that we're studying. So we solved for that problem really well just in cancer. And so different companies are solving for different things. Some are solving for drug binding, some are solving for biological activity, et cetera. So I think all these approaches, eventually will all come together in the next 5 to 10 years. And, I think because of our focus on oncology, like I mentioned earlier, is that it's not just artificial, really is augmented. And the faster you can ask questions, throw them away, ask new questions, decipher things, we're just changing the cycle of how we're able to solve for problems, and therefore speeding up the process and lowering the cost. And this is ultimately what pharma wants, ultimately what every industry wants. I mean, every CEO wants to know the answer to a question faster and cheaper. And the issue is just until only a few years ago, we didn't have this capability. And now we do. I remember when we first started solving for developing these genetic signatures, that process would take 1.5 to 2 years, millions of dollars, teams of 10 or 12 people. And the tool that we used, oddly enough, Excel. Today, that's totally changed. I mean, now we can have a team of 2 or 3 people, virtual staff or experts, and we can take weeks or months and not 1.5 or 2. And it's been, quite proven. We've had publications at the American Association of Cancer Research, at AACR, at ASCO, which is, one of the most important conferences. We're able to have a trial in a phase 2 trial for metastatic hormone refractory prostate cancer. We're able to design a new drug. So we've got a lot of milestones that for a small, young company, just in the year that I've been there, that in a traditional biotech, using traditional drug discovery and drug development approaches, would have taken 3 or 4 years. And so this is what I'm most excited about, because it's going to get these drugs to patients faster and hopefully change their lives and, more importantly, change their outcome. And hopefully, as the industry develops and approaches, really change the cost. The cost is very important. Every industry that's been touched by AI, the costs plummet downwards. And that's the promise in drug development and in biotech, is that we can do the same thing. Let's use AI to drive these costs down so that we can make drugs a non-issue, that we can make them affordable, approachable, and cost effective.
And of course, it is early days yet, but I've got to ask, have you enjoyed any early successes or triumphs that you could possibly share with us today that highlight just how much of a critical role technology is playing and will continue to play in the fight against cancer?
Yeah, so the one that I'm very excited about is that we do have a drug that we saved, LP100. That drug now is in a phase 2 trial for metastatic hormone refractory prostate cancer. And we saved that drug by understanding really what patient population it would work best in terms of what prostate cancer, because that drug failed the prostate cancer trial. But it worked well in certain prostate cancer patients. And so we were able to uncover that, license the drug out to a biotech partner in Europe. It's now about halfway through a phase 2 trial. And that's the same approach we're using for other drugs as well. So that's one thing I'm very excited about. Second one that's really exciting is that we have a next generation DNA damage repair inhibitor. And so this drug, we are able to understand why it works really well in certain cancers versus others. And so we're able to develop a signature, and that's been published on. And so this drug works really well in cancers that express PTGR1 or overexpressors of that. And, that is a phenomenon that would have taken potentially years to uncover, and we're able to do that, in literally months. And so that's also very exciting. So we are able to characterize biological mechanism for this drug, and that has totally changed and influenced how we're doing the lab work and how we're thinking about the trials. And so those are two things I'm very excited about.
And of course, some people listening might think that artificial intelligence or AI is just another business buzzword. But can you tell me more about why drug development today in particular is a perfect environment for AI as far as you're concerned?
High cost, lots of data, low success rate, massively opening up opportunities globally because of the openness of people wanting to share their genomic information, globalization of R&D efforts. So, it's a perfect problem area for AI.
Well, how much of an impact do you think it will actually have over the next 5 years and beyond?
Oh, I'd love to think about that problem, but, I'm also practical. And, I think the best impact we'll have is getting our current portfolio of drugs to market. That's going to be the most important thing. If we can impact patient lives and show people this is how we did it using this approach that was data-driven and augmented by machine learning and faster, cheaper, better, I think that is, to me, the practical approach is that we can have the best platform and it can give us all kinds of insight, but we're not a platform company at the end of the day. We're not selling just our tech. We're leveraging the tech to save lives, to design different trials, to design different drugs. And so I'm very focused on solving for two problems. One is creating the best platform possible, but then using that to then actually get these drugs to market. And so I think the impact I want to make is I want to get these drugs to market and into patients. And once we do that, then then we'll have plenty of opportunity to fund and develop the platform as much as needed. So that's one of the challenges when I talk to other of my peers in the tech and AI community is that they're focused purely on the platform or the tech or the approach, but not enough consideration is put on, okay, that's great, but you actually have to go change patient lives. And how can you do that if you don't have the drug, or if you're not equally putting the drug or diagnostic in front of actual patients? And so I think the best thing, the next 5 years I'm really focused on is rescuing more drugs using this approach to do it cheaper, faster, better, but then get those drugs to the right patients and really show the industry that this is the right approach. And, there's nothing like success, right? That has success invites more success, and invites more collaboration, and invites more capital. So to me, the problem that I need to solve for is, let's get these drugs to the right patients faster and change the outcomes for patient groups. And I think that will help us drive that this data-driven and machine learning-driven approach is a potentially better approach to drug development.
Fantastic. And for people listening all over the world, we've got people listening in 165 different countries. If they're inspired by the work that you're doing here and how you're using technology to fight cancer, can you remind them of where they can find you guys online, and also reach out and contact your team if anybody has any questions, especially if they obviously work in the medical industry too?
Absolutely. We invite collaborations all the time. They can find us at lanternpharma.com. That's our website. Our Twitter is Lantern Pharma, or at Lantern Pharma. And my personal Twitter is The Real Pana. And so we can find me there. I talk a lot about new technologies that are affecting healthcare and genomics and personalized medicine. So that's the best way to contact us. And any of you are interested, my email is pana@lanternpharma.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll add those links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode. And I always say at the end of every podcast that technology works best when it brings people together. But what you're doing here is using technology to play a critical role in actually fighting against cancer, which is an amazing thing. It really is. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and share that story with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I hope this was useful and insightful. And again, I do think that we're on the beginnings of a whole new era for drug discovery.
It seems absolutely crazy to me that so many cancer drugs are failing clinical trials for reasons that we discussed earlier in the podcast. But there was a huge glimmer of hope here, and technology is at the heart of it all, because precision oncology therapeutics using AI, genomics, and machine learning is a mouth-watering and exciting prospect to me. But if you work in the healthcare or medical industry, or indeed a patient, I'd love to know your thoughts, your experience, and your insights. So please share. After listening to today's podcast, if you've got any questions or you just want to share anything, email me directly, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. And also remember, we're racing to 1,000 podcast interviews on here. It's quite a milestone. So I do invite you all to send in your best wishes for the show, and we'll have a big party to celebrate together. So if you ever want to browse through the back catalogue of episodes, we are available on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, all the usual places. But you can also find all those episodes and photos of the guests, if you're just curious what they look like, over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. But I'm afraid that's it for another episode. Got so much more lined up for you guys. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.